Hello everybody, the Lawn Gnome is here, and you're not the only one with gifts. Next Friday, one of the most anticipated summer blockbusters will hit theaters, and that, of course, is X-Men Days of Future Past. What makes this film so anticipated is the fact that it's uniting the cast of X-Men First Class and the cast from the franchise that pretty much gave us an entire revolutionary film genre in the comic book superfilm, and that, of course, is the 2000 film X-Men and its sequels. Considering the fact that I've already reviewed X-Men First Class, as well as The Wolverine, I thought that it would be good to give you guys a throwback day this month, in which I review all the films that have yet to be reviewed. So, this is a quadruple throwback day. Aren't you guys in for a treat? We'll start off with the X-Men film from 2000. Me being a fan of X-Men, a purist of the comic books, love the characters, love the story, big fan of the animated series from the early 90s. Considering that I had heard about the fact that this movie was going to be coming out when I was 10 years old, it was unfortunately something that took way too long just because of the fact there were so many stories to choose from, so many characters to pick out, and more importantly, a concept in which the technology really needed to catch up with the time. Well, in 2000 it seemed to have been that it was ready, and X-Men was born, and such came a whole bunch of incredible comic book films after it. X-Men is not a fantastic movie, but it definitely was an enjoyable film, especially for X-Men fans. I mean, it didn't go exactly towards the Marvel X-Men timeline, and ironically, none of the films actually ever have, but what they did was they took the most popular characters of the time, and a great cast to go along with them. I mean, you have Patrick Stewart breaking the Star Trek mold and playing Professor Xavier, you have Sir Ian McKellen playing Magneto, you also had Halle Berry playing Storm, Anna Paquin playing Rogue, Jason Marsden as Cyclops, Ray Park as Toad, and an unknown of a character that everybody was excited to see. Nobody knew if he was going to be able to pull it off, and that was Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. And he probably gave us the best persona of Wolverine that he possibly could, and because of this role, he is Wolverine. I mean, he's been in so many other projects, but you could definitely see that Wolverine is probably one of his favorite characters to play, and he praises the fact that he was found and cast as Wolverine. Now, the movie itself was good as far as how the cast worked together, because it did give us some essential pieces of the X-Men story, even though they may have been out of order. The relationship between Magneto and Professor Xavier, the origin stories of Rogue and Magneto, as well as a very loosely based plot that was connected to the very first comic released in 1963. However, was the movie fantastic? No, but for someone who had always wanted to see the X-Men come onto the big screen, I definitely think that it was worth the wait, so the first X-Men film will get a 2.5 out of 4. But then we move on to X-Men 2, or X2 United. Of course, it takes the story that was originally put together and gave us a couple of new characters. Nightcrawler was in the movie, played by Alan Cumming. I wasn't really too fond of the fact that they made him a lot older. I kind of thought that it would be nice if Nightcrawler was really, really young. Maybe somewhere in his late teens, early 20s, because I really don't know how old Nightcrawler was supposed to be in this film. But it was a bigger story, a broader story, a lot more towards the human aspect, towards the mutant community, and it ends with a incredible cliffhanger, which was definitely one of the reasons why this movie was better. I was so excited to see where we would go next, especially because of the ending that we got. And another interesting thing about that movie was it also elaborated on the relationship between Rogue and Iceman, played by Shawn Ashmore. It also had a friend of theirs who ended up going to the wrong side. X-Men United, also a great film, much better than the first, and I will give that 3 out of 4. But then we go to X-Men The Last Stand, X-Men 3. Now, this movie, unfortunately, was not as good as its first two films. And a lot of people don't seem to understand why, but I can tell you why. 1. Bryan Singer is nowhere to be found in this movie. He is not directing it. Brett Ratner took the director's chair and directed X-Men The Last Stand. And that's because of the fact that Bryan Singer went on to do a flop of a movie known as Superman Returns. If you have any thoughts in regards to Superman Returns or you want to fight back on that, throw comments in the box there. This movie, unfortunately, tried to take too much and put it into one movie. Very similar to what happened with Spider-Man 3. Although X-Men The Last Stand was a lot more tolerable. It threw the Morlocks, the concept of finding the mutant cure, which ironically ties in another fan favorite in the X-Men world, and that is Angel, who was played by Ben Foster. Unfortunately, he and Vinnie Jones, who played the Juggernaut hysterically, brilliantly, they didn't give him enough screen time. They just give him that one major line, which is, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!" And that's pretty much the claim to fame in this movie. Juggernaut is a much more complex character, has a lot more ties to the X-Men than you would think, and the fact that he pretty much did not have any role in this film was really, really sad. And the other major thing that got shafted was the story of the Dark Phoenix saga. They turned Jean Grey, played by Famke Janssen, into really next to nothing as far as her story goes. Ellen Page also plays Shadowcat, who was also a very interesting addition. Peter Cudmore, who plays Colossus, unfortunately doesn't have much of a speaking role, but it was cool to actually see him. Another big thing that was great was the fact that Beast shows up in the film, and he's played beautifully by Kelsey Grammer. But there was a lot of other elements in this film that X-Men appreciators could really enjoy, but unfortunately, the movie was pretty much all over the place, and it has some very interesting moments that really don't make sense, but ironically, if you're a reader of the comic books, the X-Men universe really doesn't make much sense anyway. So, X-Men The Last Stand, not so great, and it gets 2 out of 4. And that pretty much wraps up the first 3 X-Men films, and then we go on to X-Men Origins Wolverine. Everybody was excited to see this movie because it was the origin of Wolverine. It had a lot of basis on a couple of comics that came out in recent years, particularly Joe Quesada's origin, as well as a comic book series called Logan, which basically talks about Wolverine in his earlier years before he became an X-Man. The highlight of this film really is Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. He was really great, even though he's not really in the movie for long, but even though you do get a very good adaptation of the Wolverine origin story, you really don't get much of a movie, and Hugh Jackman, as great as he is as Wolverine in the X-Men films, and I even saw it in the Wolverine, he seems to be pretty much non-existent and not the same guy, and I'm not too happy about that. I mean, we also got a great rendition of Sabretooth by Lev Schreiber. That was probably another one of the big reasons why I was able to sit through this movie. X-Men Origins Wolverine was not great at all. I still don't understand why they made a sequel, because I really don't think it deserved one, and I'm going to give X-Men Origins Wolverine 1.5 out of 4. So that's a pretty long throwback, guys. All 4 X-Men films that I have not reviewed, they've officially been reviewed, and I'm hoping to give you guys a review of X-Men Days of Future Past real soon. The X-Men franchise, thanks to Bryan Singer returning, has really been revitalized, and the trailers look phenomenal, and especially considering that they've greenlit another X-Men film, I'm very excited to see how that's going to turn out. I am the Lawn Gnome, thanks for sitting and watching, and remember that actions speak louder than words.